Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, where we're covering the topic of building stronger student communities through community marketing. My name is Jack Craig, and I'm the Head of University Partnerships at Unibuddy, and I'm delighted to be joined by my colleague Nick Sawarna, David Penney from UCAS, and Natalie Lobb from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. We'll run through some more detailed introductions in a moment, but firstly, I wanted to give a quick run through of what to expect today. So during this session, we'll be exploring the role of community marketing specifically through the lens of higher education marketing, recruitment, and retention. And by drawing on the expertise of our panel, we'll be addressing what community marketing means in the context of higher education, why community marketing is so effective at engaging a Gen Z audience, how universities and colleges can approach planning their own community marketing strategy, and what channels and tech can be deployed to deliver successful community marketing campaigns. But before we move on to the panel and the introductions, I wanted to provide some context as to why community marketing is such an important focus area in 2023. We know that an institution's student community is critical to distinguishing a college or university in the eyes of prospective students, especially in an era of lookalike marketing campaigns, AI-generated articles, and clickbait social media posts. With 1 in 5 students never feeling represented in student advertising, the demand for genuine interactions and peer-to-peer social proof of the university experience has never been more important. And by letting your brand values speak through your student ambassadors and wider campus community in spaces that empower students to feel a sense of confidence and belonging, you can have a pronounced impact, not just on decision-making pre-enrollment, but also their longer-term well-being as a member of your student community. And community marketing addresses a need that students have that is fundamental both to their decision-making pre-enrollment as well as their longer-term academic success. And this is the need for an authentic sense of belonging. In the last decade, enrollment numbers in the US are down 3 million, with only 41% of those who do enroll going on to graduate within 4 years or less. In response to these alarming trends, Unibuddy surveyed over 1,500 first-year students at the beginning of the year. And our data indicated that low levels of student confidence are a significant driver behind these numbers. Our report found that over 50% of students lack confidence in their core academic abilities, with 30% doubting their ability to see their program through to graduation. High numbers of students also reported concerns about lacking the necessary social skills to make friends, network, and succeed, all of which led them to feel significantly less connected to their university community. And it's in addressing this lack of confidence where effective community marketing can be so impactful. And during today's panel, we'll be exploring the ways in which universities can effectively leverage community marketing in order to communicate with students in a way that's accessible, authentic, and inclusive, not just at the pre-application stage, but throughout the student life cycle. So on that note, I think it's time to introduce our panelists. Firstly, I'm delighted to welcome Natalie Lobb, Assistant Director of International Recruitment at the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. Natalie has a key role in leading UMBC's international student recruitment initiatives, with one of her focus areas being the communication strategy for admitted students. This means an important part of Natalie's role involves driving community marketing initiatives for offer holders and helping to create a sense of belonging amongst these students before they arrive on campus. So welcome, Natalie. We also have David Penney joining us. So Dave serves as the Head of Education Marketing and Communications at UCAS. So at UCAS, as well as operating, the application process for UK universities, colleges, and now apprenticeship providers, UCAS also offers a wealth of services that support prospective students and apprentices in their decision-making. So, and also prior to his role, Dave has worked at a number of UK universities leading their marketing and recruitment teams, and therefore brings a wealth of experience to today's panel. So welcome, Dave.
Hi, Jack.
And last but not least, we have Nick Sawarna joining today's panel. So Nick serves as UniBuddy's Senior Content Marketing Manager and has over a decade's experience creating compelling content for digital audiences. And he brings expertise in developing marketing strategies to create both demand and engagement. Some say that Nick wrote the book on community marketing. Whilst this isn't strictly true, he has written UniBuddy's recent community marketing white paper, an end-to-end community marketing guide specifically tailored to higher education. And that's something I'm sure we'll be sharing with all attendees after this session. So welcome, Nick.
Hi, everyone.
So to kick off our panel session and provide a foundation for our conversation today, I wanted to get a sense from the group as to how we should define community marketing and why it's so important within the context of higher education. So since you're launching your white paper today, Nick, I'm going to start with you. Based on your experiences pulling the paper together and compiling that data, be interested to hear, what does community marketing mean to you?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I just want to say why we wrote this white paper to begin with, because we found definitions of community marketing were varied and ambiguous, to say the least. Normally focusing on social media marketing, which is part of the story, but it's not the whole show. So as an edtech software as a service provides solutions for higher ed community marketing, this is obviously something at UniBuddy that we wanted to dig deeper into and help our higher ed partners define, leverage, and plan for these types of campaigns. So with that said, community marketing, to me, what I discovered through writing this white paper is it's any type of marketing initiative which stimulates audience-initiated engagement. As its name suggests, it's an invitation to engage with an established community. So for higher ed, this is your students, and community marketing initiatives are those campaigns which put them firmly in the driver's seat, as opposed to more traditional marketing like display ads or your website, for an example, which are somewhat more one-dimensional in terms of engagement. These initiatives for community marketing can be anything from social media marketing, as we talked about, I just talked about, or form style student communities, to events, to something as simple as connecting a prospective student with a student ambassador. So at UniBuddy, we strive to provide these tools which centralize this experience for our higher ed partners in providing places where students can meet, socialize, and nurture their higher ed journeys through the power of conversation, which is primary to community marketing.
Cool, thanks, Nick. Maybe Dave, kind of moving over to you. I mean, at UCAS, you're very plugged in to the sentiments of students who are considering education options. I'm kind of keen to hear your thoughts on why this current group of students are more or maybe less likely to engage with the kind of community marketing approach outlined by Nick. Why does this resonate with this audience?
Yeah, it's massive, Jack. I thought it was a really good definition from Nick as well. I suppose for me, it really comes back to that innate human need to kind of belong and feel understood. And then you kind of pile on top of that, there is a bit of, when we go out and talk to students, but you read about it in the media as well, there's a bit of a trust crisis. So the official sources that perhaps someone from my generation had been used to relying on in terms of making big decisions in our life, which university to go to, which job to pursue, buying a car, etc., is that deluge of information available to us has done the opposite of providing clarity. It's made us more suspicious. And we know in our everyday life that when we get a recommendation or a friend or someone we really trust points us in the direction of something, we're much more likely to trust that. And someone really smart who works in university marketing said to me that the mistake we often make is thinking that we're marketing a course or a location or a research program or something like that. What we're really marketing is an invitation to come and join a new tribe or find a new community. And that is a really, really big decision. And there's so much excitement in that, but there's also so much fear. And when I go out and talk to students, and we do a lot of focus groups with students, when they're thinking about to make a mistake and, in a sense, join the wrong tribe. And that's really where the power of community marketing comes in, because you're inviting people when they come and join your university to join a whole series of different communities, an academic community, where they're going to live. So housemates, that kind of community, sports and clubs. And there's this sense of, am I going to fit into all of those communities, and what support can I expect when I'm going to join them, and trying to work out whether that community is right for them. And so we noticed this at UCAS during the pandemic, mostly when all your traditional kind of ways of making decision had started to break down, and just the power of community marketing in that pre-application and application journey to really help students find each other first and foremost, and then have a discussion and make sense of this decision that they were going to make.
Yeah, I mean, I think that point around finding your tribe, finding your community is a huge one, and it's something very primal in prospective students. So, I mean, when we surveyed students last year, the biggest fear amongst kind of incoming students was not, fear of academic failure or even kind of fear around like financial concerns or finding a job after graduation. They're really key. But the biggest fear was actually whether you'd be able to make friends. Like that's 100%. A huge driver of students' decision making, and anything you can do to kind of provide reassurance on that and kind of make your campus community feel like it is your tribe is going to be hugely influential. Sort of
just think on that last point, Jack. Absolutely. Will I fit in as one of the big fears? And perhaps second to that is, am I making the right decision? There's this massive fear that there's this whole series of decisions that you have to make in your progression from school to higher education, and that you're going to get something wrong. And that sense of fear and the wrap around that community marketing can do in terms of trying to unpack those fear and find your North Star, etc., is really, really powerful.
And we don't want to be too doom and gloom, but we can't ignore there's a fear. And I think I was talking to a business school this week. There's always like a received knowledge that like during recessions, business school applications go up. Like that's kind of been historically the pattern, because people know their career is not going to be maybe put on pause, or not going to get a promotion. This is a great time to invest in yourself. They're not so confident now, because whilst we may or may not be in a recession, there's the after impact of COVID, there's very severe macro global security concerns. Like there's so much uncertainty that people aren't necessarily confident, or at least seeing the pathway of what comes next. And that can be quite paralyzing when making a decision around education or investment in education. So I think more than ever that fear and maybe the kind of inertia in terms of decision making that comes with that is more pronounced than it's ever been. Natalie, kind of given Dave's comments and this idea around the importance of articulating the community, the campus community, and how that kind of maybe complements a student and their goals and desires. Like, I'd be keen to hear more about, how you're leveraging community marketing and your student advocates at UMBC and what this means for you and your team.
Sure. So we work very closely with a team of fantastic global ambassadors, and they're really our main voice for a lot of our marketing initiatives when it comes to international recruitment. I say this again and again, pretty much on every webinar and every session that I'm in with stakeholders across the institution, is staff at UMBC can talk ad nauseum about what that student experience is like, but we're not the true experts on that. Our students are. They're the ones who are experiencing it on a day-to-day basis. So we have a great rapport with our student ambassadors, and I work really closely with them to help them share out their authentic experience and what it's like at UMBC. And some of the ambassadors have different interests, different strengths, and different preferences in terms of how they prefer to communicate with prospective students. And I think that that's something really important in our community marketing efforts as well, because one student may be really comfortable on camera, but that might not resonate as much with a prospect who's not, as extroverted, for instance, and they might find that one that, you know, prefers to talk online and chat with them that way. And then, you know, that really helps our marketing efforts and helps students to see, oh, okay, I'm not this, you know, super outgoing person, but there are those people who are finding success at UMBC as well that way. It's a place for everybody. So we encourage, like I said, we encourage our ambassadors to be their authentic selves and share their authentic experience. And that's worked really, really well for us as part of our marketing initiatives.
Yeah, I think it's an important point that authenticity isn't just giving a true picture of what life is like at your university. It's being true to your communication style and your personality, and people will sense that in those interactions. And also that point of, you know, when building an ambassador program, you really do want, if it's going to be effective and do a kind of a good job of conveying what life is like on campus or at your institution, and it should represent the diversity and the different personalities and everything that makes that community up, and that's key. Nick, I'm going to kind of revert back to you here, just again, and with the idea of like further maybe defining community marketing, especially when kind of compared to more traditional campaigns or paid marketing campaigns. You know, you actually, in your role, right, you're creating content for both traditional paid campaigns at UniBuddy as well as community marketing initiatives. Kind of what's your take on what makes the latter so effective, and also how do you approach the two different disciplines?
Yeah, so I just wanted to build on what Dave said about trust and what Natalie said about authenticity, and also add, it's just this idea of control too. You're giving more control to your audience, the narrative, the conversation, if you will. As a SaaS marketer for an ed tech company, kind of gives me more of a bird's eye view of what they're looking for in these solutions. And two stats would stand out to me in our piles of data that we have are that 1 in 4 students don't feel represented in ads. Meanwhile, 92% of Gen Zs say, as we discussed earlier, say speaking to a fellow student can help them make a decision about where to go to school. So the difference there is 25% effectiveness, 92% effectiveness. And for me, that's a no-brainer about how effective community marketing could be. And I think it comes down to this idea of personalized authenticity. Students want to feel wanted, heard, and welcome at your school. A paid ad and website copy or a mass form email, it just doesn't achieve this. They want someone to speak to. They want someone who's walked in their shoes. They want to know which library has the best grub, which clubs they should absolutely join, what it's like to actually study in a program, not just program information. Ultimately, they want to know the vibe, if you will. And that's the true power of community marketing. It's real, authentic conversations with real peers, real faculty, and real students to help them get a pulse on what it's like to actually study at your school. And yeah, that's what we're always trying to emulate through our suite of solutions, ways for students to connect with one another and ask questions on their terms with their own peers.
Thank you, Nick. That's super, super clear. And I mean, I'm just reading a comment in the notes of the chat, and this actually relates to one of the questions I wanted to ask. Is it's all well and good talking about community marketing, but there's maybe a departure from kind of how marketing and recruitment teams have typically engaged with their target audience. And I think sometimes there's reservations, right, around the logistics of managing student ambassadors and kind of letting them loose on your target audience. And a question here from Madeline, can I ask, in regards to student ambassadors, how do you keep motivation in the ambassadors to keep engaging and producing content and doing it in their own voice? So Natalie, maybe I'd like to kind of hand over to you on that one.
Sure. So it has, taken some training with our ambassadors to really get them, when they first start, especially, to really get them comfortable with the idea of, hey, we want you to just tell us what it's like. I remember when I worked with some of our ambassadors when they first started, I flat out asked them, what didn't you see? What were you missing when you were looking at an institution? And, you know, eventually they gave me some pieces and I was like, all right, well, let's fill those gaps. Let's make sure that we make up for what you didn't have and give that to students, because I'm sure you're not the only one. And that's, you know, as we're building on that, that really keeps the students motivated in terms of, you know, wanting to share more with students, getting excited to share their ideas of, hey, you know, I think we can reach out this way, or let's talk about this sort of thing on social media, for instance. So it's worked really well for us. And we also do regular feedback sessions, especially when we're starting a new activity. So I know we've started incorporating some of our ambassadors into our agent training sessions. And when we first started that, a colleague and I sat down with two of the ambassadors that first did it. And we're like, what did you think about this? Like, what worked? Because they both worked with when they were coming to the institution. And I was like, would this help you? What do you think the agent needs to know since they're from your home country? And, you know, again, they gave us some great feedback and they were honest with us. And they're like, they don't need to know that. Or this approach, this answer was, you know, this question was not relevant, something like, and it's worked really well because we're truly treating them like the experts that they are. So we put a lot of trust in them and they've definitely fulfilled that.
Nice. I've got some experiences too, Jack, running ambassador programs. And I've seen really bad ambassador programs and then kind of stood back and thought about it. And the mistake I think often that universities make with their ambassador programs, and I'm guilty of making this mistake, is they kind of use their students as the extension of the corporate voice of the university, and they're not. They are the authentic, and it's the big A word, isn't it? Authentic experience of what it's like being a student. When I was at one university, we decided to heavily invest in our ambassador program, and we hired a full-time person to kind of be the professional mentor to those ambassadors and really develop their storytelling skills. And one of the best exercises I saw, and we developed it for the open day talks, was we had really low satisfaction with the student talk, because we were giving the students the PowerPoint and saying, follow the script, etc. And it was just coming across as completely inauthentic. And we asked one of the students to kind of reinvent it and to do the story, their story of coming to the university through a series of Instagram and Facebook posts. So they basically trawled through their Instagram and Facebook wall for the last 3 or 4 years, told the story of them at school, what they were hoping and dreaming of, their first open day experience when they moved into halls, their first work experience, how they met their best mate, you know, when they moved out into private rented accommodation. And the transformation at the open day, I used to watch the talk. They used to get polite applause when they did the corporate talk, and people left the room and there was no interaction afterwards. As soon as they started sharing their own story, and we stopped scripting them, and we stopped being fearful that they were going to say something wrong and that they were going to go off piece, and they talked authentically, which meant they talked about the good, the bad, and the ugly type stuff of coming to university. And it wasn't just all this Pollyanna-ish optimistic story. It was a truly authentic, you know, things went wrong, you know, they burnt their first meal, etc., etc. People started approaching them directly after the open day talk. They would come up and you could kind of see that was community marketing working, because they're a real person with a real story. And it's like when you read, I always think about when you like buy something on Amazon and all the reviews are positive, you're immediately suspicious, aren't you? You kind of think something's going bad here. And I always read the good reviews and the bad reviews equally when I'm buying a product. And I kind of feel we need to do that with our student ambassadors, is set them free a bit and let them talk authentically about what they love about the university, but also perhaps what wasn't so great and how they overcome that, because we buy into those stories as part of community marketing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a key. People aren't naive and they will sniff it out if someone's been.
They really do, yeah.
Yeah, or they're following a kind of a university corporate talk track. Look, we can provide people with parameters, we can provide people with coaching, but it needs to be authentic stories, because that's what's going to resonate with an audience. And this isn't just about getting numbers through the door. It's about getting the right students for your university through the door. And you're only going to know if they're a good fit, as if you're right, Dave, if they get the good, the bad, and the ugly, not just a kind of hyper polished version of what life is like on your campus. So thank you all for your insights there. I think that was like a really, really useful foundation for the audience in kind of giving us an understanding of what we're referring to when discussing community marketing. And I now want to drill down into kind of what constitutes a successful community marketing campaign. And maybe just sort of building on like a key component of this, right? You know, we've been speaking about this, like, you know, how do you leverage student ambassadors and advocates, and how do they contribute to these campaigns? You know, I'd be keen to kind of maybe leaning back onto you, Natalie. Like, we've kind of covered, you know, what is it about the student voice which makes it so effective for marketing to students? I mean, I'd love to hear your advice as someone who's been managing ambassadors for a while. And, you know, what's your advice to everyone here today on how to kind of cultivate this voice and ensure that it's kind of represented in your campaigns? Because I think can be a reticence if you don't have a kind of ambassador program about kind of taking this on. And I'd love to kind of hear how you approach this.
Sure. So it's really, I'm going to piggyback a little bit on those feedback sessions. That really helps us, you know, get that authentic voice from the student and align that with our brand. And, you know, like David was talking about, and you were talking about, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and everything like that. You know, when you picture traditional marketing, we don't always talk about that. And so what we do with our ambassadors is really work on, you know, kind of understanding different perspectives. And I mean, they're great at it already. But, you know, realizing that, hey, you know, just because I had maybe a negative experience in this course, or I didn't, you know, get along with the professor or something, doesn't mean that someone else won't. And, you know, everybody learns a little bit differently. So how can we, if we're talking about a certain program or we're talking about a certain course, how do we address that? How do we address those challenges and still, you know, stay on brand with what we're trying to get across to the university or to prospects, excuse me. And something else that we really do to cultivate that voice and make sure that it's authentic and on brand is we don't use scripts like at all. With our ambassadors, I give them a couple of points and I encourage them just to go with it. And the first couple of times they do that, they're like, what? You just want me to go with it? But now they're used to it. And I just tell them, hey, this is our context for this. And it works really, really, really well. We've done a couple of, you know, campus tours with different buildings on campus. And you know, I said, we were in the gym one day and I said, hey, we're just going to go with it. We're just going to do a walkthrough of the gym and we don't have a script and we're going to make a video. And it was so much fun. The ambassadors were laughing. They were roasting each other. You know, they were using the equipment and everything like that. And we got great feedback. And I know that, for instance, for this campus tour, the person who ran our campus gym was like, this is a wonderful, wonderful way to showcase it. And you're really showing what that experience is like for students. So yeah, that's really important for us. You're staying on brand still, but you're really, you know, capturing what that experience is like and you know, sharing their authentic voice.
Awesome. And yeah, and I love that example. And I think, you know, again, as we've kind of touched upon, people will respond to that and they'll sense it, that authenticity. Dave, I wanted to shift gears slightly here because obviously so your advocates and your ambassadors can be the kind of medium of the message, but it's also, you know, I think it's important when building campaigns is like, what is the focus? What's the content of these campaigns? So again, we've touched upon this, you know, UCAS has a wealth of kind of intent data and student data at its disposal. I'm keen to get your take on currently, you know, what are some of the kind of key topics currently top of mind for incoming students and apprentices? And then how has this been kind of evolving over the past few years?
Yeah, I mean, obviously always follow what's going on in the news because students are very plugged in. They can, this is kind of when you're 16, 17, 18, you're starting to get your independent thoughts, aren't you? So our data at the moment says cost of living crisis in the UK is a big thing that students are worried about, and they are tuned into that. At the moment, my sense is I don't think the expectation we're seeing in the data is that students progressing to higher education at the moment are asking the question, given the backdrop of the cost of living crisis, what is my student experience going to be like? And I think it's really wrong of universities to ignore it or not be realistic that perhaps so students at the moment in the data are telling us that they expect they're going to have to make compromises on their student experience. But beyond that, they're wanting to really understand what that looks like. So are they going to have to work more in part-time jobs, or is their social life going to be curtailed, and what support will be available? And this is all kind of perfect for community marketing, isn't it? Because the students that you've got at the moment are making those, they are living with, the price of food going up astronomically in the supermarket. They are having to work more, et cetera, et cetera. And it feels like there needs to be a really authentic discussion to kind of allay some of those fears, but also be really realistic about perhaps some of the choices that students are making. And I know universities are doing some great work to support their students with cost of living and putting on budget meals, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm not sure that is finding its way into the marketing. And certainly when we're surveying students, that they can't remember getting messages from the prospective universities they're applying to on the cost of living crisis. So that's one thing that we're sort of banging the drum at UCAS, is have a conversation, but an authentic conversation using student voices around managing money, that type of thing. But some of the other things that students really care about, that we look at our data, because we survey them every year about what factors drive their decision making. And what's really interesting to me is that official sources like league tables have been declining in importance over the last few years. So when I was first working in student recruitment marketing 15 years ago, league tables were everything. They were like the top of the tree in terms of influencing student decision making. Now it's things like student reviews, and so student reviews are, in my mind, an absolute proxy for community marketing, because they're authentic. They absolutely lean into what students want to hear, that social verification moment. And I worry that a lot of universities look at it and think it's something that I can't control, and therefore I just hope it goes away. And I think that's kind of like burying your head in the sand type strategy. The other thing that we see in the data all the time is they truly want to understand the academic experience. When you go and talk to students in school, they know they love history, or they want to study media, or English literature, or biology. And they have some reference about how that subject works at school, and they know it's really different. So they know the learning experience is going to be different. They perhaps don't know what a tutorial is versus going to class, or how that whole academic experience differs. And I think showing students what the academic life is like, and how it's different from school, and how your academic experience at your university is different from your competitors, is really something that community marketing could work very hard for, because I kind of like, students absolutely know that universities are different, and they understand that not all universities are the same, and that they have different plus points and different minus points. But they kind of look at traditional marketing, and it is very samey and bland, and it doesn't help them make that decision about why is this course different from the next course.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. It's rare that you'll see kind of like a traditional pay. It does happen, but pay marketing campaign that really pops out and differentiates the institution. And it feels like community marketing, not easier, but a more reliable way of achieving that, because you are just leveraging the voice of your students. Just a kind of a question to Natalie. Like Dave touched on a few themes there, including cost of living, as something that's kind of a predominant concern right now. But be interested to kind of see kind of what's the kind of current themes amongst your audience. I know obviously in the US it's slightly different circumstances, but currently have you seen any kind of recent trends in the types of conversations prospective students are having with your ambassadors, or like an uptick in certain things that you're having to be more proactive in how you address as a recruitment team?
Sure. So cost of living is obviously a big one. And our ambassadors, like David said, are great at, addressing this because they're getting it out now. Being in the United States, another big one is safety. And that's a huge concern. And we're fortunate enough, even though we're right outside a big city. We're 10 minutes outside of Baltimore, but we're a safe, quiet suburban campus. But we address it very directly. We get this question a lot: is it safe? I see you're near Baltimore, you're near Washington, D.C. With everything going on in the world, it is a concern. And we talk to students, and our ambassadors talk to students and say, hey, it's it is like living in any other city, and we do encourage you to take the precautions that you would in a larger city. And then we do sort of jump in.
Feels like Natalie may have dropped off there. So maybe Dave, I had a follow-up question. It's around, so one of the things that I was wondering when you were speaking around all of these different kind of concerns and preoccupations of students, but does this kind of evolve across the recruitment cycle? So, someone maybe kind of earlier stage looking at student reviews may have very different kind of concerns and questions around someone kind of post-offer holder stage, right? So, I mean, is that something you're able to track, or you have a sense of how those, because I think community marketing, we kind of touched upon this, can be utilized and should be utilized from kind of awareness stage right up until kind of enrollment. But does the kind of types of concerns and the preoccupations of students evolve through that journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And they sort of, you can track it quite carefully in terms of that pre-consideration stage. So at the very early stage, students are just trying to work out what the offer is, etc., and what's available, and that they find it really hard. Students find it really hard they find it easy to kind of think of 20 universities or colleges or jobs they could do. They find it incredibly hard to kind of turn that into 5 and then one choice, and that's how the system works in the UK, is you apply for 5 universities, then you make a firm and insurance choice. And once you get them through that stage, there is this huge sense of what does that transition look like? And so we produce a lot of blogs at UCAS, and the most read blog, and this always amazes me, gets hundreds of thousands of hits in that August-September period, is just, what are the things I need to pack when I go to university? So that we have a blog which is 22 things you must absolutely take with you to university. And it gets 800,000 views between August and September. And there's like the most read section of UCAS.com. And that you can just see the psyche going on there, which is, I'm moving away from home for the first time. I may forget something. You kind of, forget that there's probably a supermarket down the road, or you can buy things, that type of thing. But just being able to dial into that fear and create that piece of community marketing, a blog, which is, I've been through this experience, and do bring your teddy bear, but don't bring your television type stuff, is that authentic content really connects.
Yeah, it's a huge point in terms of when kind of planning any kind of content campaign or community marketing campaign, like having visibility of what are the kind of specific concerns in that different period, and being proactive in kind of matching it. It's something that we're really hyper focused on in trying to do at Unibuddy, and help universities do that as well. Nick, just kind of on this topic, I wanted to come back to you. I mean, Natalie and Dave have shared some insights on, how to leverage the student voice and some of the different themes community marketing can be particularly effective in addressing. However, a key component of these campaigns is ensuring that you're reaching an audience in the first place, right? So I'd love to get your take on, either how to build or find an audience? Is this simply about establishing the university homepage as the source of truth and then just driving as much traffic as possible there? Or should universities be doing more and being more creative?
Yeah, so I think what I would recommend is, as a content marketer, your website's great. 72% of Gen Z students are visiting your website for initial research on programs, et cetera. And this is based, again, on Unibuddy data. But I mean, for every 10 students that visit your website, one's going to leave if they're not finding the information that they're finding. So where are they going? So we found, 55% are going to social media after. Your Gen Z prospective student, they're an omni-channel customer. What this means is they're going to be working across multiple channels, multiple devices, and they use multiple ways to get the information they want. So it's a bit of a blend of both. You have to understand that this audience is going to be looking for that authentic voice, but they're also looking for the basic information that they need to make an informed decision making process. So in terms of identifying your audience, I think it's more about giving them the conduits they need to start the information research, and providing them with that driver's seat, as I talked about earlier, that they can start asking questions, looking at information, and gathering their research to make an informed decision. Nice.
Thank you. And that, Nick, that's really super helpful because it kind of segues into the next topic. So, we've built out, in a bit of detail, some key ingredients for a successful community marketing campaign. But I wanted to talk from a bit more detail, right? The channels and the tech that universities can deploy to deliver successful community marketing initiatives. So Dave, a moment ago, we spoke about, how the concerns and preoccupation of students evolve throughout the recruitment funnel. I'd be keen to get your take on what formats and channels. You mentioned reviews earlier, right? Which ones lend themselves best to community marketing? And then, but how does the way students engage with these various channels change as they move through the recruitment funnel?
Yeah, I mean, student reviews are, I think, useful when you're sort of quite far into the into the decision-making process. One of the things we do a lot at UCAS is we try to create, in a sense, new communities each week by hiring, by doing live question and answer sessions on the UCAS Hub. So that's our logged-in environment. And the lesson for us was we started doing these first during the pandemic when, the world was falling apart, exams had been cancelled, etc. And what we really noticed was that we would have someone like, the Secretary of State for Education on one of our forums talking to students around how exams are going to be cancelled, how they'd be assessed, etc. And we used to follow the question and answers. These were Facebook Lives and they turned into lives on our own website. And the students were there not really to find they wanted to hear from the Secretary of State for Education, but they were there to find each other. And all the chat forum that was being stimulated by the official voice, etc., was really students trying to understand what that official announcement meant, and then and comparing notes and talking peer to peer. So those ability for just those online chat forums for people to find their community. And it's amazing how you kind of, you almost feel a bit creepy watching the conversation, but there are friendships being made in those chats, and those friendships then they're connecting with each other and kind of swapping their Twitter handles, et cetera, to further the conversation. So I think for universities, and we certainly do this at UCAS, finding as many opportunities for the communities, for people to connect and then make those online friendships then become real friendships is really, really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, the kind of, obviously this comes back to that original point earlier around, the biggest fear or the primary fear for many students is, will I find my friendship group? Will I find my tribe? And it's an unavoidable fact that Gen Z feel like uber comfortable in online spaces, at least initiating these relationships. So, if you know that someone that's going to be a massive driver in a decision making and probably their longer term academic success is finding a friendship group and the reassurance that comes with that, then I think it's kind of almost incumbent on a university to look at ways of facilitating that, both, just from a duty of care to your students, but also it's gonna have positive impacts for you as an institution. Natalie, kind of coming back to you here, you've told several really, really compelling stories around your student ambassadors and your advocates, and kind of what a fantastic job they do of kind of articulating your kind of authentic brand voice. I'd be interested in hearing about how do you kind of amplify that? Like, how do you get it out there? What's the kind of tools, or how are you integrating this into your campaigns to ensure that you're kind of maximizing the amount of opportunities that you have, or prospective students have, to kind of have these touch points with your student ambassadors, because we know they're so influential and meaningful?
So we try to incorporate them as much as possible in pretty much everything we can. So we don't just, stick our ambassadors on social media. They're in our info sessions and that are led by staff, and they're treated like a staff member and an expert in that. We do a great one on, preparing for the visa interview process, for instance, and staff lead that, but our student ambassadors are great at, telling them what the student visa process is like. Like I said earlier, we incorporate them in our agent trainings, and then in some of that more, professionally produced marketing as well. They're everywhere. And so we make sure that they're included in that. And then something else that we do is we push it again and again and again and again, because what one student may need at one point in their student journey, another student might want that or think of that later down the road. So it's important that we remind students that our ambassadors are a resource, or they keep mentioning the same thing over again. And then one other thing that we do with them, along the lines of mentioning it again, is having different ambassadors mention the same thing, because what might resonate with one student won't necessarily resonate with another. So, for instance, when we're talking about something like what to pack, just the way that one student or one staff member says it, might not click, but another ambassador could say it a completely different way, and that's when it clicks with a student. So we repeat, but also repeat differently is something we do.
No, I mean, it's a really important point, because like different ambassadors for various reasons will resonate with different aspects of your target audience. So making sure that you're doing everything as possible to make sure that the kind of right prospective student is put in front of the right kind of fit ambassador is key, because they're going to be the most influential. This is a kind of an open question for the whole group. Nick, you kind of mentioned around social media, and that's like an unavoidable fact that students are interacting with social media as a way of researching your institution. And that kind of leads us, because we're seeing certain universities now build more influencer content or try and leverage that more. What's your take? And this is open question to everyone, versus like university owned content versus influencer content. Do they complement each other? How do you approach that? And is that something that people are kind of currently integrating with their current campaigns, or are there any reservations?
I could start off with this. For me, I think you just need to make sure that you're getting the right information and you have the right brand control. So yeah, you do need to have coverage across all these different channels, but you also want to make sure you have the channels in-house to leverage this data, leverage these conversations, and make sure you can ensure, for example, student safety, and make sure that they're having engaging environments that are beneficial for their decision-making process. So I kind of think of it like coagulating everything into one specific area. So, think back before personal computers, you'd have a typewriter for writing, calculator for adding numbers, and a landline telephone for calling someone. Now you can fit this all in your backpack. And this is how I think higher ed marketers can think of community marketing: is how can I make sure that I'm taking all this data and all these tools and keeping them in a centralized location that gives me full visibility and full control over what's happening inside of them. So that would be my take on that.
Well, Natalie, have you kind of experimented or leveraged influencers at all? Or how's it going at UMBC?
Sure. So I know that, we've talked about this a little bit in some separate conversations we have, but our student ambassadors are influencers. So they're just another tool in the toolbox of the decision-making process for a student. So I don't think that they're necessarily competition with who we want to call like the official influencers, someone that might have, 50,000 followers or something like that. But their voice and their perspective counts as well. And so we want to make sure that that's shared with prospective students so they hear that.
Yeah, on influencers, I've seen a couple of universities do it really badly, and I think it doesn't pass the authenticity test. And in fact, one university did it and then got a bit of PR trouble because they were using influencers that had no connection to that university. So that's always a kind of a big kind of red flag. We've used at UCAS, we've used official paid for influencers on a couple of campaigns, and the results weren't great. When we find authentic students that can talk about with kind of passion, conviction, and share their experiences of being a nurse or being a degree apprentice, something like that, and that they make it's not always polished content, etc., but it does feel real, and it does kind of meet that test of showing you a part of the student life that official marketing channels wouldn't go near. It has much more cut through. The performance, we look at the performance of that in terms of engagement on our social media channels, and it smashes anything that we ever got when we were paying reasonable sums of money to hire official influencers.
And I think that's it comes back to a theme that's kind of come back again and again through this panel, which is, yes, obviously your brand is important, and it should be a thread that runs through your community marketing, but you do have to relinquish some control to a certain extent. If you are kind of hyper fixated on brand and controlling the message and just having a facade of community marketing, it's just not going to work. It's not going to resonate. It's not going to cut through. And I think that's the balance that I think anyone kind of dipping their toes in the water of community marketing needs to be treading really carefully on. Otherwise, it kind of undermines the whole purpose of community marketing. So I'm acutely aware that we're beginning to run short on time. So we're approaching the point where we can kind of open up the discussion to audience questions. So whilst I can see a couple trickling in. So whilst we wait for the audience to submit these via the Zoom chat, and please do, add your comments, your feedback, your questions. I want to take a quick moment to talk through, how here at Unibuddy, we can play a key role in enabling the community marketing efforts of universities and colleges. So at Unibuddy, we have developed an end-to-end solution that over 650 university partners are using, and they're using it to empower their students to progress confidently through the recruitment cycle by enabling these peer-to-peer and student-to-student connections at every key decision point in the recruitment process. So Unibuddy can be used to facilitate peer-to-peer conversations at the awareness stage when students are first considering their higher education options and visiting platforms or services such as UCAS. And every day, thousands of students are using Unibuddy to validate and inform their decision-making, not just when they are applying and accepting offers, but all the way through to enrollment and beyond. And, in addition to peer-to-peer chats, over 100 of our partners are now using Unibuddy Community to support their community marketing and recruitment campaigns. So through community, students can form deep connections with future and current classmates to support their arrival and transition into campus life. And, as we've discussed today, by providing an inclusive, safe, and university-owned online environment, you can provide your students with a space that will empower them to feel reassured, excited, and confident in their decision to attend your institution. And we've seen already that by increasing student confidence, you will also have a pronounced impact on how likely a student is not just to kind of deposit and enroll, but also to stay and to succeed academically. So if you would like to learn more, please feel free to drop us a line, or obviously you can book a demo via our homepage, but I'm going to kind of open up to some questions now. So we always do get a few questions here on ambassadors and recruiting and motivating those. So we've got a couple here. So from Donna, with pressures of courses and extracurricular needs and demands of their time, more and more students becoming even more time poor for the need to sort of work part-time. How do you recruit student ambassadors? How do you find them? And what's the kind of incentive to kind of convince them to become ambassadors? And I think this is a really key point, because we've spoke a lot about entrusting our ambassadors and giving them the kind of keys, right, to the brand. But you have to have the right fit of ambassador, the right fit of students to do that. So I'm keen to hear, maybe starting with you, Natalie, like how do you go finding these right fit ambassadors?
Sure. So I'll be honest, our ambassador program is paid, so that's a really nice incentive for our students. But even if it wasn't paid, our student community, they're so appreciative of the support that they get on campus, the camaraderie that they have with their peers and faculty and staff, that I know a number of them have said to me that, even if it wasn't paid, they'd be motivated to do this as well, because it is such an important chapter in their lives. And they want to encourage other students who are looking at higher education to get that experience as well. But another tip that we use when it comes to the recruiting of ambassadors is I go through word of mouth a lot. I say to our ambassadors who are graduating ahead of the new recruitment cycle, who would you recommend? Do you have any friends that you think would fit? Because what we're looking for in terms of an ambassador. So who would you suggest? So I use word of mouth a lot, and then also we push it out anywhere and everywhere. That the application and things like that, it really helps. But word of mouth is the biggest one when it comes to recruitment.
Nice. And I think, we work with, 600 plus partners, and we have paid programs, we have voluntary ones, and both work. My previous role in higher ed before joining Unibuddy, it was a voluntary program, very long established, and it was oversubscribed every year. We had more applicants than we needed for ambassadors, because people they were passionate about the brand, about the institution, and then that's what you want, right? So if we pay them or not, you do want people that deeply care about your brand and the success of your institution, and also a natural inclination to kind of want to go back and help people who are in the shoes that they were a year, 2-3 years ago. Dave, you've mentioned earlier, you've seen ambassador programs work really well and others less so. Kind of from your sense, like what are kind of 2 or 3 things that like make up a really good student ambassador?
I've only done paid programs, and I think you pay your ambassadors a decent wage, etc. So it's attractive. It's got to be kind of better than working in McDonald's or something like that. No disrespect to McDonald's. Absolutely what Natalie said. I used to, when I was recruiting student ambassador programs, go and ask the faculty staff, who's someone who's done something amazing on your course that could talk passionately about your course, that could be a student ambassador. So getting recommendations from faculty is absolutely part of it. And then I just think it's that sense of continually training and investing in your ambassadors, because the best, I often used to then go and hire ambassadors to be part of my marketing teams, because they'd had so much training development, they had such a great experience at university that I just didn't want them to leave the university. And I think that's the mark of a successful ambassador program, is that these students are kind of going on, and the confidence that they get from doing this ambassador experience, and all the skills you get in terms of selling and public speaking, and thinking on your feet and talking to people from all sorts of walks of life, those skills really translate in terms of your career, and telling that story is super, super, it kind of means your ambassador program is something special.
Yeah, I mean, I think we shouldn't overlook the fact that this is an awesome professional development opportunity
really is,
for someone. And it's more so, I mean, like my job during university was working in a credit card call center. With retrospect, I think it would be much better served being a student ambassador. We do have some more questions, but we are at time. So I'm just going to take this opportunity to wrap up. Thank you to David, Nick, Natalie. You've been awesome panelists and have provided a range of incredible insights. And I found it super illuminating, and I hope the audience has as well. And to everyone who's attended, thank you all for attending and for contributing via the chat. As mentioned, all attendees will be receiving a copy of Nick's white-hot white paper on community marketing. So keep your eyes on your inbox for that. But otherwise, yeah, thank you all. Good afternoon and good morning to the North Americans. And goodbye from Unibuddy.